All right, so one of the last units that we talked about was solving radical equations. So these are just equations that have a radical sign in them, right? Like a square root symbol, like that. And we're only sticking with square roots for now. Now, you have this paper, and so this is just kind of like a flow chart that you can kind of follow if you need to. So our whole goal, or a couple things to remember, is that square roots and squares are opposites of each other. So in order to get rid of this, I got a square. Or in order to get rid of a square, we take the square root. Okay, just like adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing are opposites of each other. So our goal is to get the radical all by itself on one side of the equation and then square both sides, and then it's just a normal equation from there. Okay, so just looking at this flow chart really quickly, it says do both sides of the equation have only radicals? So like no other operations or numbers outside the radical. So if the answer is yes, then you square both sides to eliminate the radical, and then you just solve the equation, meaning get the variable by itself on one side using opposite operations, and then you have your answers. Now, if that's answer is no, then we have to get the radical all by itself on one side of the equation. So you're going to use opposite operations to move numbers around. Then you square both sides of the equation, which will eliminate the radical. And then you solve the equation and you have your answers. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple examples. You should have this paper as well. So if I were you, I'd have it out in front of me and I would do the problems with me as I'm doing them. And then you can work on these. Okay, so on this first one, notice that we have radicals on both sides of the equations. I don't have like a +2 or anything like that, or like right here, see how this has a -2 on the outside? I don't have any of that on here. So my first step here is going to be to square both sides. By squaring this, all we're doing is we're eliminating the square root and the square. So we're just getting rid of that. So now I have x minus 6 equals 2x minus 19. So just by squaring both sides, because both sides just had radicals, I'm getting rid of the radical, and now I can solve the equation like a normal equation. So I want to get my x's together, so I'm going to subtract 1x from both sides. So negative 6 equals x minus 19, and then add 19 to both sides, and I get 13 equals x. And of course you can go back and put 13 in for x and see if you get the same answer for both sides. And if you do, then you know you did it correctly. All right, so number 2 is the same way. Both sides just have a radical, so we're gonna square it. So then I have 2a plus 18 equals -2 minus 2a. Okay, all right, so now I want to get my a's together. I'm going to add 2a to both sides. Now, if you use a different method here, like if you were to add 2 to both sides first or subtract 18 first, you'd still get the same answer. So minus 18 from both sides, so I get 4a equals -20, and then divide by 4, and I find that a equals -5. Okay, and again, plug that in and make sure it works. All right, so that's that style when you have radicals on both sides. Now, on number 3, notice that we have this -2 outside the radical. So we have to get rid of that first before we can square both sides. So I'm going to put a +2, and now I have 6 equals the square root of p minus 7. Now I have a radical all by itself on one side of the equation. This one doesn't have a radical, and that's okay. But the radical has no other operations or numbers. So I'm going to square this side, which means I have to square that side. So 6 squared is 36. The square root and square cancel each other out, so now we have p minus 7. And then we're going to add 7 to both sides, and I get 43 equals p. Okay, so again, the biggest mistake that I have found that students were making was forgetting to square the 6. Okay, remember that you have to square that and it becomes 36. All right, jump on down to number 7. So number 7 is just like the number 3 that we just did, except for on this one now, we actually have a times here and we have a plus. So we have to get rid of both of those things before we can square both sides. Always get rid of a plus or a minus first. Always get rid of a plus or minus first. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I have -5 times square root of 13a minus 3. This gives me -30. divide by -5, divide by -5. Square root of 13a minus 3 equals 6. Now that the radical is all by itself, now I'm going to square both sides to get rid of the radical. So now I have 13a minus 3 equals 36. And then from here, it's just a standard equation. So 13a equals 39, divide by 13, and a equals 3. Okay? So you just have to get your radical all by itself, and then you're just solving, and then squaring both sides, and then solving. Okay? So get radical by itself, square both sides. And then you're solving the equation. Okay, those are your basic steps. All right, I do want to take a look at number 6 just because it has a fraction in it, and so let's talk about that really quickly. So you have a radical on both sides, so we're just going to square both sides, and so that cancels and that cancels, so I have x divided by 5 equals 2x minus 90. Okay, so again, it's just a simple equation. We're using opposite operations. So here, this is being divided. What is the opposite of dividing by 5? It's going to be multiplying by 5. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5. Now, when I do this, I like to put parentheses around here and put the 5 out here. That way, my brain automatically sees that I have to do distributive property. So these 5's are going to cancel, so I have x equals, so 5 times 2x is 10x. 5 times negative 90 is going to be negative 450. Okay, and then from here we're just going to solve. So I would subtract 10x. So this is negative 9x equals negative 450. And then divide by negative 9. And that is going to be x equals 50. Okay? So again, just because it's division, we still use opposite operations. You're going to multiply. The thing to remember is that when you multiply this side by 5, you're going to multiply each piece by 5. Not just one thing. Both of those get multiplied by 5. Okay? All right, what I would like for you to do is to finish up this side. So you're doing questions 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. And then also work on the back and see how you do on those as well. If you're getting stuck, please call me or message me on Teams, or actually I take that back. Message me on Schoology or give me an email. Send me an email and I will respond to you and help you out what I can do. Okay? All right, if you have problems, make sure you contact me. Thanks.